The N64 can proudly boast a very healthy handful of the best games of all time. It's a console that changed games forever, but just like a lot of early 3D adopters, it had a bunch of games that didn't adapt well back then, and they surely don't hold up well now. Grip the middle part of your N64 controller tight for good luck. These are the worst N64 games of all time. Quick, super obvious bonus terrible game that I can't be arsed to bring up again. Superman 64, you know it, you know about it. I really got nothing to say about that game. Especially when this game may just be so much worse. The Carmageddon series on PC and PS1 was a popular, straightforward and highly violent franchise. You had to survive and complete races, destroy the competition and pick up as many points as possible for mumming down pedestrians in your wake while also not getting caught by your mum while playing it. Dumb and really not that great at all, but at least those games arguably had some entertainment value behind them. That value is completely absent from Carmageddon 64, which suffered from so many distinct flaws that it's hard to focus on any one wretched mistake in particular. With bland, dated graphics, a terrible soundtrack and just sound design in general, and controls that make you feel like you got absolutely plastered for getting behind the wheel like you're a Hollywood actor, the N64 may not have had a Grand Theft Auto game, but it did have Grand Theft Oh No, if you're counting this one. A frankly honking port of the second Carmageddon game, Carmageddon 64 makes the simple act of turning a corner into some kind of fistfight with a Large Hadron Collider. It's a game that fights through the entire journey and is just hideous to look at. Quite honestly, one of the worst PC ports of all time, Carmageddon 64 faced many delays before it was eventually sharted out onto the N64, and we really wish its developer had, much less fibre in their diet. Katana. Does that work? You know, something's gone a bit wrong with your revolutionary game when the Game Boy Color version of it is by far the best version. John Romero is one of the key figures behind the creation of such groundbreaking, influential first-person shooters as Quake, Doom and Wolfenstein. He's also a lovely guy with somehow even lovelier hair. 57 years old and he currently has more hair than I think I've ever had in my life. But make no mistake, his baffling, visually horrific and barely playable mess known as Daikatana is utterly, completely terrible. I feel like saying that's going to summon some Daikatana revisionists in the comments, and I won't be listening to you. Daikatana was arguably doomed, for much of its long development period. Everyone at least initially expected something special from Romero, who seemingly turned into Colonel Kurt for a while there. The game would repeatedly push back to incorporate new ideas and technology, but what we finally got for the PC and N64 felt like a parody of what was promised. The dismal AI and horrendous controls were highlights for a game with unlikable characters, absolutely awful companions, dumbass story, and a difficulty curve so obsessed with making you its that it forgot to be fun. Those frogs, why are the frogs like mini-bosses? By the gods, what a mess. Even at the time of its release in 1997, War Gods felt like the worst things about the 90s were boiled down to an essence that would cause severe poisoning if ingested, and not just because the Nickelodeon goo would be in that weird broth as well. An unremarkable arcade game that received several ports, the N64 version of War Gods is perhaps the worst of a very depressing bunch. Never mind that the game feels like an aggressive rip-off of Midway's own Mortal Kombat, with players choosing among a group of edgy, completely forgettable warriors. It's almost a surprise that the characters aren't also named like off-brand Mortal Kombat misfits. You half expect these dorks to be named counterfeit names like Johnny Sturdybox, Tanya Knife, or Seasonally Frigid. While it did have some bangers, the N64 was home to some of the worst fighting games ever made. IGN dismissed this one as a good idea that went sour and scored it a 4.3 out of 10, while GameSpot called it a strange mix that didn't quite come together. Even magazines like Nintendo Power, which are usually obviously pretty generous to N64 games, weren't that kind. Ultimately, War Gods was an early failed experiment with the 3D engine Midway would later use for the MK franchise. That 3D was poorly executed in 1997 and it's comically bad in the modern era too. War Gods has frustrating controls to match characters and a story that you just can't bring yourself to give a damn about. War. What is it good for? Not this. You know what, sometimes it's kinda surprising to realise that Midway limped by publishing games all the way up until 2009, especially with joke games like this one, which was developed by the Call of Duty Zombies guys, by the way. The fact that Midway took their mediocre Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey 98 and re-released it as Olympic Hockey 98 was bad enough. If this happened today, there's a very, very high chance that Reddit would get quite upset about the whole thing. You see, right, the games are virtually identical with the exception of national teams replacing NHL teams and the addition of an Olympic tournament feature. Midway couldn't be bothered to make any changes to a game whose overall quality was roundly criticised for being a sequel that doubled down on the weakest points, while offering virtually nothing new. True, the game can be fun in brief spurts, but that's almost exclusively undone by how boring it all gets before long. There's nothing of any depth here, and that becomes clear after about 20 minutes of play. IGN infamously gave this reskin of a bad game a big fat 0 in its contemporary review. Normally that would seem kind of harsh, but this is one of those FIFA Legacy editions on Switch we used to get but for the N64, except it's somehow even less upfront about that. This was a real assault on how much laziness you were willing to withstand.
This is a street fight, no rules, just a plain old-fashioned whooping. That hit leveled him. That swing had no chance.
World Championship Wrestling in 2000 was a train wreck in every sense of the word. If you didn't already know that at the time, WCW Backstage Assault was probably where you realised that the house that Disco Inferno built was not long for this world. Here's the main problem with this game. There is no ring in a wrestling game. Every match takes place in back rooms, garages, the void where the wall's charisma would be, boiler rooms, or next to cars. Ooh, cars. What could have been a cool gimmick as a side mode is instead the entire game. You're just smacking people into walls and wondering if these wrestlers had been in traffic pileups, but no, they just look like that. Kinda nuts that Just Bring It would come out a year later. Controls are sluggish, moves rarely connect properly, and hit detection feels like guesswork. The roster is large enough, but the wrestlers all feel weightless. Throwing Sting or Goldberg around has the same impact as tossing a paper aeroplane in your dreams. Reviews at the time buried it pretty hard, and pretty rightly too. IGN gave it a 2 out of 10, calling it basically a complete disaster. Fans agreed, and sales were abysmal, but it was also WCW in 2000, so it could have been the best game ever and nobody would have bought it. It was so bad it effectively ended EA's brief stint in the wrestling genre, leaving WCW Backstage Assault remembered as a cautionary tale in how to miss the point entirely. All you have here is a game that hates you for playing it more than Bret Hart hates Bill Goldberg. Probably the biggest claim to fame that Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue has is that it's often seen as the hipster's pick when it comes to the worst N64 games. Recent months before the PS2 came west, barely anyone even knew this existed for quite a long time actually. This game should have been an easy win though, really. Kids loved Power Rangers, the show was still doing okay, and the idea of morphing into giant Zords sounded cool. Still does. But there's nothing cool about this piece of arse. Most of the game revolves around planned rescue missions where you run through empty city blocks saving civilians. There's almost no variety. The objectives repeat, the environments look barren, and the Rangers move with all the grace of shopping trolleys piloted by drunk infants. Combat is worse. Punches and kicks barely register, hit detection is all over the place, and enemies stand around like cardboard cutouts waiting to fall over. The Zord battles could have been the highlight and maybe could have even made the game kind of salvageable, but they're just slow, awkward 3D slap fights where giant robots feel like toys from Home Bargains who are missing most of their face. The only good thing anyone will ever say about this licensed mistake is that you can finish the entire thing in little over an hour. Beyond that, don't even bother. Nothing says Batman Beyond like a video game that looks like a dog's backside and plays like a punishment for daring to dream of fun. Batman Beyond Return of the Joker for N64 is based on the movie that brought back Mark Hamill's Joker to essentially end Batman Beyond on a dark, dramatic note. And the show overall really did a lot to rehab Batman's image after Batman and Robin. This adaptation of that movie apparently wanted to undo all of that. Just look at the way Batman moves. Has he been eating enough fibre? This is a thoroughly bad release in its controls, graphics, sound, main menu, options, and basically everything else, and it's wrapped in a big, bright, miserable package of tedium that is difficult to put into words. Environments are bare and lifeless, character models look blocky and unfinished, and animations are stiffer than Keanu Reeves with acting instruction other than kill. He is good at that kill though, to be fair to him. It's just so lazy. Lazier than writers who keep saying so for emphasis. So lazy. Beat up some bad guys, move to the next room, repeat. Long after your eyes have rolled into the back of your head and your journey to the afterlife begins, this game will continue to drag on. At least in death, you won't have to play Batman Beyond Return of the Joker on the N64 ever again. And what's crazy is that's another one that's less than an hour long. 0 out of 10. After the decent success of Mortal Kombat 3, which was not without its own issues, Midway signed off on a string of profoundly not very good games as they aimlessly chased trends. They really put the mid in Midway back then, didn't they? Often referred to as the worst spin-off of all time, Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero might be the worst of this period, offering an intriguing concept that becomes borderline unplayable when it's run through the specifics of a Mortal Kombat game, or any game really. Taking on the role of Sub-Zero in a solo side-scrolling action platformer, players are subjected to an elaborate series of crushing disappointments. The Mortal Kombat fighting style translates very poorly to the format, and that's really just the beginning of the annoyance that awaits you here. Sub-Zero has one of the worst controller setups in the history of the Nintendo 64, and that's saying nothing. This game might be salvageable if it wasn't so difficult that you may go blind from the sheer frustration of trying to make even one jump or survive one of the normal encounters with a random enemy. The rest of the game is arguably just a veritable forgettable orgy of frustration, but the platforming here feels completely subhuman. Every single jump here feels like Sub-Zero's cartilage just grew in half an hour ago. It's the controls and immediate degree of difficulty that propels Sub-Zero to a special kind of awfulness. If you thought you were safe from it, it is, for some reason, a part of the Mortal Kombat Legacy collection. Oh, brother. Blues Brothers 2000 is a cringy, unnecessary movie sequel, partially saved by some pretty solid musical numbers. Partially, it still isn't very good at all. Not even 25 years of revisionism could save it. You don't get that soul-saving grace in the video game though. It's right at home with the film's almost decadent level of failure, offering a platformer devoid of fun, charm, or anything that could even be regarded as ironic entertainment. It's frankly kind of astonishing that Blues Brothers 2000 shares the same console and genre as Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, but then again it is published by Titus Interactive, who also published Carmageddon for the N64. Where do we even begin with this glaring, glistening turd? Well, the platforming elements are uninspired to the extreme, with the constant feeling that you've seen this done better literally dozens of times. The rhythm game elements are annoying at best with the N64 controller. The graphics are nothing special, there's nothing to keep you going, and yet the whole thing is so intensely easy you'll be done in about the time it takes to watch the actual Blues Brothers 2000 movie. Don't do that instead, or buy this. Really. Don't do that. Don't do anything. Just stay in your room and hope the Millennium Bug belatedly takes the movie and this game out of existence, then go and get the original movie on 4K Blu-ray instead. If you didn't live through the 90s, which is precisely 4 of you watching this maybe, it was a pretty cool time. But you were at least spared the glut of movies, shows and video games that told you thousands of times per second how cool and edgy they were, cowabunga and so forth. If you were to build a town around this radical behaviour, the supposedly funny fighting game Clay Fighter 63 1/3 could run for mayor and somehow be even more incompetent than Mayor Quimby. Unfortunately, if you take away such classic jokes as racial caricatures and a title that makes you wonder who the lead singer of Primus is beefing with, what you're left with is even more depressing. Bad controls, unappealing visuals, and a brutally slow playing style that makes every fight feel like a century of existential dread. Clay Fighter 63 1/3 isn't even fun to type or say, let alone play. Performance issues don't help. The frame rate dips constantly, inputs sometimes fail to register, and load time drag on longer than most matches. Reviews at the time were pretty brutal. IGN gave it a 3.5 out of 10. Kinda surprised nobody gave it a 1.3 or a 3.5 out of 10 score though, what a waste. Or like 3 1/3? That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Clay Fighter 63 1/3 was later released in a Blockbuster rental exclusive edition called The Sculptor's Cut, which adds new glisten to this giant mound of crap. Today that version is one of the rarest N64 games ever made, and of course now one of the most expensive, proving that people will buy anything as long as you put a very rare sticker on it. I've been JB for Cultured Vultures, it's been very cool to have you. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.